Welcome back, writers. I'm Mr. Ruckdashel. I'm excited to have you here in my writing classroom. Today starts a long, exciting, important journey for you. You are a middle schooler, a sixth grader, and at this point, our writing is going to take off like a rocket ship. I hope you believe that because I do. Today, we get to realize the fact that often the best place to figure out how to write and what to write comes from reading other people's writing. So, with that in mind, buckle up, get your thinking hat on, and be prepared to see what good writing looks like. Let's go. So here's the deal. With our personal narrative that we're going to start today, and looking at examples of narrative writing, looking at an example of narrative writing that's quality is a lot like looking at a cake. You know, those like big cakes, those cakes that have multiple layers on them. Sometimes they're at weddings, although, we haven't seen a wedding probably in a long time since COVID. So probably you've all seen those cakes on like GBBO. The Great British Bake Off. Because like me, it's probably one of your favorite shows. At least secret favorite shows. I understand. You don't have to tell me. It's fine. It's right here. Well, anyways, studying a mentor text is a little bit like a cake. As when we look at that cake and go, that's an amazing cake. How could I ever do something like that? When really, think about the layers. It's just one layer that's simple, built upon another. And they end up making something that's so amazing, it's hard to grasp how it could be done. When really, it's just inch by inch. And that's what we'll be doing in our writing today. Learning a little bit at a time. So, we are going to take a look at Allie's notebook. It's a notebook from a middle schooler, a sixth grader, and it's a great example of what your writing should look like and sound like. And so we want to study it and take note of the things that it does really well. When we study a text, the first thing we should do is think of it like a book we're taking off the bookshelf in the library. We are grabbing it because we're going to read it for fun the very first time we read it. And so in a moment, that's what we're going to do. After we read it for the first time, we will go back and see what parts of it speak to us. What parts we go, boy, that really gets me, possibly because I can totally picture what's going on in the story. Once we decide this part really gets me, we have to decide how'd they do that, or guess how they did that, or notice how they did that. All right, let's check out Allie's notebook. I shivered a little bit. It's pretty cold, I said, as I dipped my toes in the water. I took a pebble and threw it far into the creek. Well, whatever, I said as I plunged into the cold water. It felt amazing. The cold water covered my eyes like gentle blankets, and the water washed over me like a breeze. Swimming is my favorite. Wait up! Yelled Emma as she ran down the hill with her floaty wrapped around her waist. Her curly brown hair whipped around in the breeze. I shivered. I was cold already. A moment after that, India's mom waded in, laughing. "Ha! It's cold," she said. Then she stopped. "Girls, out! Out of the water!" She pushed us back to shore. I looked back and saw a long, thin water snake slithering towards us. I gasped. I quickly swam underwater in big, wide strokes. Okay, looking at this piece of writing, we've read it, we've enjoyed it, and now it's our turn to glance back through it and notice what part we really liked, what part really spoke to us. Now, obviously, the thing that we'd want to write down first in how to write a powerful personal narrative is focus on one episode. So you notice this story is just one time. It's not the time they went camping. It's the time we found a snake at the river. So they didn't summarize anything so far, and they've just told this moment with great detail. That's the first thing that right now I'd like you to pause your video for and write down under a new title that says How to Write Powerful Personal Narrative. Okay. So now actually looking at the text, I'm going to give you what I think is the thing that jumps out to me, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to pause the video and figure out one for yourself. What I notice in this text is the author's use of small actions. The very first sentence is a small action, shivered. Now, yes, it's a small movement, as in, ugh. However, the point is that instead of saying, I was a little bit cold, they said, I shivered a little bit. We can picture someone shivering a little bit. But if someone says, it was a little bit cold, it's hard to imagine what they're doing in that moment to let us know that it's cold. And that's the beauty of a small action. And if you look at the next line, it says, I dipped my toes. Dipped. She could have said, I put my toes in the water. Now, here's the difference. Putting your toes in the water, to me, it doesn't necessarily mean, oh, I'm afraid that the water's cold, if you just put them in. But dipped means I'm afraid. Dipped means I have a suspicion. I'm worried the water is freezing. And as we look at the rest of the paragraphs, the author does an amazing job each and every time of using small actions. The third paragraph says, I plunged. Instead, it could say, I went into the cold water. But that's not a small action. It's not described in a way that lets us picture what's going on. And our number one thing is to help the reader see the story. So that's what I've found so far. Now, pause the video and see what other kinds of writing you notice that help us to see the story. And I'll give you one hint as to what I think we should write down next. Each paragraph, except for the first one, has an example of this. And if you listen closely, you just might hear it. Pause the video. Writers, if you said that exact dialogue was what you noticed, really helped you picture the story, then you were thinking like me. You might have thought of something else, and that's totally okay. You shouldn't erase it. You should cherish that you have a unique mind and you thought of another idea. But right now, I'd like you to also add this to your How to Write Powerful Personal Narrative chart. And that is exact dialogue. The second paragraph says, it's pretty cold. The third says, well, whatever. Now, it's not just dialogue. It has to do with exactly what's going on. The second paragraph says, it's pretty cold as she dipped her toes in the water. As in, we hear her say it's cold and her actions reflect it. Those are exact dialogue words. It wasn't more than we needed. It was exactly what we needed. Okay, writers, we are here to the end of our video, and it's almost time for you to write. I just want to remind you of two things. that we learned today in Allie's writing. Number one is focus on one episode so that you can write with great detail. Don't summarize. No summary. So by that I mean, if you're writing about the time you went to a beach, it should really be the time you built the sandcastle. If you're talking about the time you went to a baseball game, it should really be about that time when you almost caught the foul ball. Make sure that you're choosing the moment, not the day. And finally, the second thing that we really noticed was we need to help readers picture the story by using small action and exact dialogue. Okay, with that in mind, I know that we're ready to go, and I'll stop talking, and you'll start writing. Happy writing.